I never thought moving into Maplewood Estates would become the start of a suburban nightmare. The real estate agent had called it a peaceful, tight-knit community where neighbors waved to each other and lawns gleamed with perfection. It sounded like the American dream: quiet streets, trimmed hedges, and homes that looked copied and pasted from a glossy brochure. But dreams, I would soon learn, can rot from the inside when one neighbor decides she's queen of the cul-de-sac. The first few weeks were blissful. My porch smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. Every morning, I'd sit by the window with a mug of coffee, watching delivery trucks roll by. Online shopping was my little indulgence, nothing extravagant, just home decor, some gadgets, and the occasional treat for my dog Milo. Packages arrived like clockwork, and life felt steady and predictable. Until the first box vanished. It was a small brown parcel from a home goods store. Nothing fancy, just a new set of LED lights I'd been excited to install. The tracking app said delivered, yet the porch was bare. I brushed it off, assuming a courier error. Maybe they dropped it at the wrong house. Mistakes happen. But then another went missing. And another. Week after week, more deliveries vanished into thin air. At first, I thought maybe porch pirates were driving around the neighborhood, plucking boxes like ripe fruit, but that theory fell apart when I realized the thefts only happened during the day, when most people were home. My packages were disappearing within minutes of being dropped off. It was almost as if someone was watching. That's when I started to notice her. 2 houses down lived Karen. Yes, her actual name was Karen, the kind of woman who weaponized her smile and thought every HOA rule was her personal scripture. She was always out front, pruning her roses or adjusting her mailbox just so, watching everything and everyone. Her yard was immaculate, but her eyes were sharper than her hedge clippers. She greeted me every time I passed, her tone syrupy sweet, but her gaze inspecting, judgmental. One afternoon, I caught her staring a little too long as the Amazon truck stopped by my driveway. When I stepped outside to grab the box, she quickly turned her back, pretending to water her flowers. It was subtle, too subtle for anyone else to notice, but I felt it. The kind of chill that comes from realizing someone's taking a little too much interest in your life. Days later, another package vanished, the one I had been waiting for most, a limited edition smart speaker. The tracking said it was delivered at 2:47 p.m. I was home by 3:10. Gone. My stomach twisted. I checked the bushes, the porch, even under the welcome mat. Nothing. The neighbors hadn't seen a thing, or at least that's what they claimed. But as I scanned the street, I saw Karen's blinds shift ever so slightly. A flicker of motion. Someone was watching me again. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every missing box, every suspicious glance, every too perfect smile from my nosy neighbor. I started making mental notes of patterns, the timing, the types of deliveries, the days of the week. It was always mid-afternoon, always when Karen was home, and always the moment after the delivery truck left. Coincidence? Maybe. But deep down, I knew better. By the 3rd week, my frustration had turned into obsession. I stopped caring about the lost items. It was the principle now. Someone was stealing from me, and it wasn't just theft. It was intrusion, violation, mockery. Every empty doorstep felt like a personal attack, a reminder that I was being played and losing. That's when I made a decision. If someone wanted to play games with me, I'd play back. Only this time I'd set the rules. I started researching hidden cameras. I spent hours scrolling through forums and videos, people catching porch pirates red-handed, confronting thieves, even setting traps. And then, one video changed everything. A man who built a glitter bomb to prank package thieves. The moment the thief opened it, glitter exploded everywhere. Bright, sticky, impossible to clean glitter that marked them like a criminal calling card. I laughed at first. Then I thought, why not? The idea brewed like strong coffee. I would order a decoy package, rig it with a glitter trap, and leave it on my porch. I'd catch whoever dared to touch it, and maybe, just maybe, humiliate them enough to stop for good. The thought of seeing the thief covered in rainbow dust was oddly satisfying, but this wasn't just revenge, it was justice. wrapped in sparkles and poetic irony. Still, I needed proof first. Before unleashing the glitter, I had to know who it was. I bought a small Wi-Fi camera disguised as a light fixture and mounted it above the porch. The next few days felt like a sting operation. Every sound outside made my pulse jump. Every passing truck, every bird, every neighbor walking by. I watched it all, waiting. And then it happened. One afternoon, I received a delivery notification for a small parcel. I stayed inside, pretending to be busy, but my eyes never left the camera feed. At 2:53 p.m., the familiar delivery van pulled up, the driver dropped the box, and drove off. 10 minutes later, a figure appeared on screen, short blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, and a bright floral blouse. She looked around once, twice, then casually walked up my driveway. My stomach clenched. It was her. Karen. Without hesitation, she bent down, scooped up the box, and strutted back toward her house as if she owned the place. No shame, no hesitation. Just smug confidence, the kind that comes from thinking you're untouchable. My jaw tightened. There it was. Proof. The smoking gun. My sweet, rule-loving, HOA-obsessed neighbor was nothing more than a petty thief hiding behind a manicured lawn. I watched the playback again and again, each time feeling the anger boil a little hotter. The way she looked around before taking it, the satisfied little bounce in her step afterward. I wanted to storm over right then, camera footage in hand, and demand justice. But something in me stopped. Not fear, strategy. If Karen thought she could get away with this, she had another thing coming. Because next time, she wouldn't just steal a package. She'd steal my trap. And when she did, the whole neighborhood would see exactly who she really was. Once I had the footage, everything changed. That small, glowing rectangle on my phone wasn't just pixels. It was evidence, validation, and permission rolled into one. The footage of Karen walking up my driveway and walking away with my package replayed in my head like a movie trailer I could not unsee. For the first time since moving into Maplewood Estates, I felt empowered. But empowerment without a plan is just anger wearing a cape. I needed a plan, and it had to be theatrical. The notion of a glitter bomb started as a joke, a wink at internet vigilante justice. But under the neon glow of my kitchen light, the idea hardened into strategy. Not just a prank to embarrass a thief, but a careful, calculated sting that would expose her. I wanted the neighborhood to witness what I already knew. Karen was not the prim, community-minded steward she pretended to be. She was a thief wearing pearls. The first step was logistics. I spent the next day like a clandestine operative. I mapped out delivery patterns, learned the courier's usual time window, and put together a list of decoy items that would be plausible enough to attract Karen's interest. Nothing flashy. Garden tools, small electronics, pretty boxes that whispered curiosity. The trick was to make the package irresistible to someone who justified petty theft as a civic duty. Then came the trap itself. I wasn't about to recreate viral videos with cheap, shoddy engineering. I wanted something smart enough to detonate glitter with a satisfying, shameless flourish, but safe enough to avoid real harm. I scavenged parts, a small battery pack, a spring-loaded compartment, a glitter canister, and a remote trigger. I wrapped the mechanism in layers of ordinary wrapping, brown paper, tape, shipping label. To the untrained eye, it was an ordinary doorstep delivery. To me, it was a glittery time bomb of humiliation. I rehearsed the narrative in my head. The delivery would arrive. Karen would take the bait. The glitter would explode when she opened it. She'd emerge a dazzling, sticky spectacle, and the camera would capture every second. After that, I imagined the ripple effects. Neighbors whispering, HOA board meetings, the rumor mill churning like a blender. It wasn't far-fetched. The community thrived on drama, and this would be the soap opera season finale. But beyond spectacle, there was a deeper motive: deterrence. Glitter stains are stubborn. Embarrassment lasts longer. If she was publicly exposed and marked, maybe she'd stop. Maybe she'd think twice. I also braced for consequences. Vigilante traps can backfire. Lawsuits, accusations, moral high ground eroded in a blink. I played through scenarios. What if the glitter stained a child's clothing? What if someone else opened it? What if Karen turned the tables and accused me? So I layered my plan with safety and plausible deniability. The package would be left in the center of the porch, not near walkways. The mechanism would be harmless. Glitter, confetti, nothing sharp. I documented everything: timestamps, camera footage, details. If it turned into a legal mess, I would be ready to show the careful precautions I'd taken. The waiting was the worst part. I told myself that patience was tactical. Each tick of the clock felt loud and heavy. I checked the live feed a dozen times, each refresh a small prayer of anticipation. Neighbors came and went, oblivious to the scheme blooming on my porch. Karen kept up her routine of perfection, folding towels on the line and scolding imaginary HOA infractions with the practiced gestures of someone always on stage. The neighborhood had never seemed so theatrical, and I liked that the stage had been set. When the day came, the air felt charged. The courier's usual window slid open, and the delivery van rolled up like a chorus entering a scene. I watched as the driver placed the decoy box with the care of a man delivering someone's dreams. 2:36 p.m., stamped neatly on the tracking app. The package looked plain enough, a nondescript box with a store logo, a believable weight. I left it there in plain sight, a nugget of temptation glinting under the late afternoon sun. Then I retreated to my surveillance post. The camera above the porch recorded everything in crisp, unblinking clarity. Scenes that would have been dull minutes earlier. The neighbor's toddler chasing a squirrel. The mailman exchanging a joke with the neighbor across the street now felt like background actors in a play directed by fate. I watched with a mixture of dread and exhilaration, knowing that the moment could arrive at any second. Minutes crawled. At 2:45, a delivery truck that wasn't the usual one passed by, and my heartbeat spiked. At 3:02, a jogger slowed, glanced at the package, and jogged on. And then, at 3:12 p.m., the movement I had been waiting for. A silhouette. Exact same posture, the same tilt of the head, the same purposeful pace, walking toward my driveway. Karen, of course, chose a bright sundress and oversized sunglasses as if she wanted to be noticed and simultaneously invisible. She paused at the property line, scanned the street, and walked up without a hint of haste. The camera captured every flourish, the sideways glance, the quick check of houses, the confident lift of the box. She carried it like a prize, like someone reclaiming a right that wasn't hers. The audacity seethed through the pixels, and my mouth turned dry. I pressed the remote trigger button that sent a tiny pulse to the spring inside the package, an electric whisper that separated anticipation from reality. What happened next was absurd and beautiful in equal measure. The lid popped with a little theatrical snap. Glitter erupted like a fireworks display gone domestic, a miniature galaxy spilling onto her hands, arms, and the front of her dress. It clung to her eyelashes, dusted her hair, and glittered in the sunlight until she looked less like a refined HOA matron and more like a disco ball that had lost its mind. She froze, a tableau of disbelief, and then moved, shedding specks of iridescent shame onto the walkway. For a heartbeat, everything was suspended. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, she began to hustle. Not toward her house, not away. She sprinted across the lawn, shaking her hands as if to dispel an embarrassment that would not easily be dislodged. Glitter traced her footsteps across the cul-de-sac like a trail of confetti at the end of a parade. Neighbors stopped mid-activity, heads tilting, eyes following. It was pandemonium with polite suburban decorum. Phones were out. Heads craned. The neighborhood's social fabric began to fray into gossip. I watched the replay in slow motion, savoring the exact moment when pride collapsed into panic. The footage showed everything. Her furtive glance at delivery trucks, the nimble movements, the way she pocketed small items. The glitter gave me something colder than evidence. It gave me spectacle, and spectacle is power in a place addicted to appearances. But triumph, as always, came paired with unease. From my vantage point, watching the glitter coat her like a ridiculous halo, I felt a dangerous elation. Justice had a shiny face, but it also whispered consequences I hadn't fully measured. As the cul-de-sac filled with murmurs and camera phones, I realized the next move would not be mine alone. Karen, exposed and sparkling, would not go quietly into shame. She was the kind of person who escalated, a queen defending her crown with whatever weapon she could find. The sound of footsteps on my porch snapped me out of my reverie. From the live feed, I saw movement at the front door, not from Karen, but from someone else. A neighbor, perhaps noticing the commotion, had come to my house. My pulse quickened with a new anxiety. The narrative was no longer a private victory. The neighborhood was awake and watching. And when people watch, they want answers. I sat there with the screen's glow painting my face as the cul-de-sac congealed into a crowd. Phones were pointing. Whispers grew like static. The camera kept recording, its LEDs blinking like patient, impartial eyes. I felt both vindicated and exposed. My trap had worked. Too well. The ripple it sent through Maplewood Estates had begun, and there was no turning it back. At the edge of my vision, my phone buzzed. Multiple notifications, messages, snippets of video from neighbors. My inbox would soon be full. The HOA's private chat might blow up. The question now wasn't whether I had caught the thief. It was what would happen next when the woman everyone thought they knew revealed herself under glitter and light. And Karen, sparkling like a guilty disco ball, was already moving towards something I could not yet see. By the next morning, Maplewood Estates was no longer a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was a stage, and my front porch video was the main attraction. The footage had spread faster than I could have ever imagined. It began with a few curious neighbors sending each other snippets over group chats. Then someone uploaded it to the neighborhood Facebook page, the digital watering hole where every petty dispute was aired like laundry in a storm. Within hours, everyone had seen it. Karen, the self-appointed guardian of community standards drenched in glitter, caught stealing packages in broad daylight. The reactions were deliciously chaotic. Half the neighborhood was giddy, thrilled that someone had finally stood up to her. The other half whispered concerns about safety and privacy violations. But beneath the noise, one truth settled like dust after a demolition. The queen bee had fallen from her throne, and the hive was buzzing with shock. I scrolled through the comments with a mixture of triumph and guilt. Words like karma, finally, and caught red-handed or glitter-handed flooded the threads. Some neighbors praised my cleverness, calling it poetic justice. Others worried about setting a dangerous precedent. But every comment, positive or negative, had one thing in common. They were all talking about me. For once, I wasn't the new, quiet neighbor who kept to themselves. I was the person who took down Karen. Still, not all applause feels clean. The morning after, I stood by my window, coffee mug trembling slightly in my hand, watching the slow parade of gawkers walking past my house. Every few minutes, someone would pause, point toward my porch, and whisper. The air felt different now, heavier, humming with gossip and fascination. I had become both the hero and the villain of my own neighborhood. Karen's house, 2 doors down, looked like a fortress. Curtains drawn, car gone, lawn untrimmed for the first time in months. It was as if shame itself had swallowed the place. But knowing her, I doubted she'd stay quiet for long. Karen thrived on control, and the glitter explosion had snatched that from her in the most humiliating way possible. By midday, I found out just how far she'd go to reclaim it. It started with a knock on my door. 3 sharp raps, not angry, not timid, just deliberate. When I opened it, 2 HOA board members stood there. Mr. Henderson, the president with a permanent scowl, and his ever-nervous assistant, Pam. They were holding clipboards and wearing that particular brand of tight smiles reserved for unpleasant errands. I didn't need them to say it. I already knew. Karen had complained. According to them, she'd filed an official grievance, harassment, public humiliation, violation of privacy. She claimed I had set up a dangerous device that could have injured her and endangered the community. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. She had stolen my packages, and now she was the victim. The board members didn't seem amused by the absurdity. They spoke in that careful, bureaucratic tone people use when they're trying not to pick sides. There would be an investigation, they said. They'd need to review the footage and ensure HOA bylaws were not violated. After they left, I felt the first tremor of unease. My glitter bomb had been harmless, yes, but rules in HOA land were murky and unforgiving. I could already hear Karen spinning her narrative, dripping with self-pity. I was just checking on a suspicious package. I thought it was unsafe. She'd turn her humiliation into heroism if she could. The day dragged on. My phone buzzed endlessly with texts and notifications. Some neighbors congratulating me, others warning me to lawyer up. And then came the video shares beyond Maplewood Estates. Someone had reposted the footage to Reddit under the title, HOA Karen caught stealing packages, gets glitter bombed. It went viral. By nightfall, the clip had hundreds of thousands of views. People online were dissecting every second, cheering, laughing, debating. The internet, unlike the HOA, had already rendered its verdict. Karen was guilty. Justice sparkled. But internet fame is a double-edged sword. Once you become the story, you lose control of it. Strangers debated my motives, speculated about my life, and even tried to guess which state I lived in. Some praised me as a genius. Others called me reckless. And all the while, I couldn't stop thinking about Karen. Because while everyone else was laughing, I knew she was plotting. That night, I saw the first sign. Through the blinds, I caught a flicker of light from her porch. Her motion sensor had gone off. Then her silhouette appeared, still, rigid, watching. For several long seconds, she stood there staring straight at my house, unmoving. Even from a distance, I could feel the rage radiating across the street. That was the moment I realized this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat. Her pride was too polished, too fragile. The glitter might have stuck to her skin, but humiliation had sunk much deeper. She would come for revenge, and in her mind, she'd justify it as balance. The next morning, evidence of her counterattack appeared. Small things at first. A letter slipped under my door. "You're a danger to this community." No signature, but the handwriting was unmistakably hers. Perfect cursive, each letter carved with spite. Then came the emails from the HOA. Concerns have been raised about unauthorized surveillance equipment. They demanded I remove the porch camera, pending review. And then, the pièce de résistance, a notice taped to my mailbox. A formal summons to the next HOA meeting. My attendance was required. The subject line, property conduct and neighborhood safety discussion. The walls of Maplewood Estates were closing in. I had won the battle, but Karen was rallying her army. The HOA was her kingdom, and she had every intention of reclaiming it. As I stood on my porch that evening, the same spot where the glitter bomb had exploded days before, I watched the sun dip behind her house. The light caught on a few stray specks of glitter still stuck between the porch tiles, twinkling like tiny trophies. But the sight didn't bring peace. It brought a warning. Justice. Even the shiny kind has consequences. And as night settled over the neighborhood, I could almost feel Karen's eyes on me, patient, calculating, waiting for her next move. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be quiet, because Maplewood Estates had tasted drama now, and drama never dies quietly. The day of the HOA meeting felt like the calm before a storm. A calm that wasn't peaceful, but electric, like the air before lightning splits the sky. Maplewood Estates had been buzzing all week, each whisper sharpening the tension. My glitter trap had turned the neighborhood's delicate politeness into open warfare. Everyone was choosing sides, whether they realized it or not. And in the center of it all stood Karen, no longer the humbled, glitter-covered woman from the video, but something reborn. I saw her that morning for the first time since the incident. She was outside, pruning her roses like nothing had ever happened. Not a speck of glitter in sight, her hair freshly styled, her face masked with practiced calm. But the way she moved told a different story, rigid, rehearsed, brittle. She wasn't just pretending to be fine. She was performing, and every clipped rose stem was another unspoken threat. When evening came, I walked toward the community clubhouse for the HOA meeting, heart pounding like a drumbeat. From the outside, it looked ordinary, just a beige building with fluorescent lights and folding chairs. But inside, it was a courtroom dressed as civility. The entire neighborhood had turned up. Some came for justice, others for gossip, but they all came for the show. Karen was already there, sitting front and center, her expression carefully sculpted into concern. She'd even worn a pastel cardigan as if to say, "See, I'm the victim here." When I entered, her eyes found me immediately. She didn't glare. She smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that said she'd already written the ending to this story, and I wasn't going to like it. The meeting began in its usual monotonous rhythm. Budget reports, lawn maintenance complaints, the broken streetlight on Elm Drive. But everyone was waiting for one topic: community safety and conduct. When Mr. Henderson, the HOA president, cleared his throat and announced it, the room tensed. Karen stood, papers in hand, and began her performance. Her voice trembled just enough to sound sincere. She spoke about privacy violations, vigilante behavior, and unsafe devices. She even dabbed the corner of her eye with a tissue, as if recalling some traumatic memory. She told the board she'd only picked up my package because she feared it might contain hazardous materials and wanted to protect the neighborhood. She painted herself as a hero, a misunderstood good Samaritan betrayed by a paranoid neighbor. The audacity was breathtaking. She described how the device had exploded on her, how she'd been injured by foreign substances, and how her emotional distress had left her unable to sleep. Each word twisted reality into a story she could control, and the worst part? Some people nodded along. When it was my turn to speak, the silence was deafening. I kept my voice steady, though my pulse raced like wildfire. I laid out the facts, the footage, the theft, the repeated missing deliveries. I explained that the glitter bomb was harmless, that I had installed the camera legally, that I'd only acted after being repeatedly stolen from. I even played a short clip from the recording, Karen walking calmly up my driveway, picking up the box, and walking away. The room gasped. It should have been the end of it. Visual proof, clear as day. But Karen was ready. She tilted her head, sighed theatrically, and said, "That video was edited." A murmur rippled through the crowd. She insisted the footage was taken out of context, that I'd manipulated it to make her look guilty. She even claimed the glitter bomb was targeted harassment, part of a campaign to make her move out. It was absurd, but it worked. Her words dripped with conviction, each lie heavier than the last. By the time the meeting ended, the board didn't issue a ruling. They said they'd review all evidence and speak to both parties privately. In other words, no resolution, just limbo. And in that limbo, Karen smiled like a cat who had cornered a mouse. When I stepped outside, the air was thick with whispers. Neighbors divided like fault lines. Some gave me encouraging nods. Others avoided eye contact. A few even looked sympathetic toward her. Karen lingered by her car, waiting. As I passed, she didn't speak. She just looked at me, calm, collected, victorious. That smile again, polished and poisonous. But her revenge didn't stop at reputation warfare. Over the next week, strange things began happening around my property. First, the garbage collectors forgot my bins, twice. Then, a citation appeared on my door from the HOA, improper lawn maintenance. My grass was trimmed perfectly, but they claimed it was too dry. Then came a letter threatening fines for excessive exterior lighting. It was harassment disguised as regulation, the HOA's favorite weapon, and Karen knew exactly how to wield it. At night, I'd noticed subtle changes, the motion light turning off by itself, my mailbox left slightly ajar, footprints near the flower beds. It was as if she wanted me to know she was there, always just out of sight. And still, she played innocent in public, hosting neighborhood watch meetings, baking cookies for families, greeting new residents with smiles that made my skin crawl. The more charming she acted, the more isolated I became. But then, something happened that shifted the balance again. One evening, as I reviewed my porch camera footage, now pointed toward the street, I caught something strange. Karen's car parked near my driveway. She got out, looked around, and placed something in my mailbox before driving off. When I went out to check, I found a small envelope. Inside was a single printed photo, a still image from my security footage, the glitter bomb explosion frozen in time. On the back, a message written in neat cursive. "You think you're clever. Let's see how clever you are when everyone turns on you. No signature, no address, just the promise of escalation." That night, sleep felt impossible. The house creaked louder than usual. The shadows seemed to shift when I looked away. Karen wasn't just fighting back, she was unraveling me. And I couldn't tell anyone. If I accused her without proof, I'd look paranoid. If I stayed quiet, she'd keep pushing until I broke. But in that sleepless stretch between midnight and dawn, an idea started forming. If she wanted a war, I would give her one. But this time it wouldn't be a trap or a prank. It would be something quieter, sharper. Something she couldn't twist into victimhood. Because the thing about glitter is, it sticks. And no matter how hard you try, you can never quite wash it away. Sleep had become a luxury I could no longer afford. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like a footstep. Every shadow cast by the streetlights looked like someone standing just out of sight. Karen's note, that perfectly cursive threat, had turned my home into a fortress of paranoia. But fear has a strange way of sharpening the mind. I realized that reacting to her only gave her control. She thrived on chaos, on pulling the strings and watching me dance. If I wanted to beat her, I had to stop dancing. I had to make her believe she was still in control, while quietly dismantling her entire game from underneath. And that began with information. Karen's power wasn't physical, it was social. She ruled through whispers, alliances, and reputation. So I started listening, quietly, carefully. I joined the neighborhood Facebook group under a pseudonym, scrolling through posts and comments she made. Every word was curated, calculated to paint her as a victim. She'd begun posting long, self-righteous updates about harassment in our community, carefully avoiding my name but describing every detail of our feud in ways that made her look noble. The comments were divided. Some neighbors rallied behind her, the kind who feared conflict and worshipped order. But others were starting to question her narrative. Too many coincidences, too much drama following one person. That doubt was my opening. I decided to gather real evidence, not of theft, but of manipulation. I went through HOA emails, group threads, and messages from other homeowners. I discovered that most of the recent complaints against me, the garbage violations, the lawn citations, even the lighting issue, all came from the same anonymous tipster. And when I compared the writing style, punctuation, and phrasing to Karen's Facebook posts, the match was undeniable. She wasn't just punishing me socially, she was abusing her influence inside the HOA to target me. Still, evidence was only half the battle. I needed to turn her tactics against her, to let her expose herself. So I built a new kind of trap. Not glitter this time, something cleaner, smarter, invisible. I set up a new security camera, one she wouldn't notice, hidden inside a decorative porch lantern facing the street. Then I printed a few fake HOA violation notices and placed them conspicuously in my recycling bin, just sticking out enough to tempt a peek. Each notice contained planted mistakes, fabricated rules that didn't exist, fake fine amounts, and one particularly juicy lie, that the HOA board was investigating unauthorized alterations to property at 214 Maple Lane. Karen's address. If she was still snooping, and I knew she was, she wouldn't be able to resist taking the bait. 2 days later, I caught her on camera doing exactly that. At 11:37 a.m., while most of the neighborhood was at work, Karen appeared on the feed. Sunglasses, wide-brimmed hat. She approached my bins like a raccoon in pearls, lifting the lid and rifling through the papers. She took the bait notice, folded it neatly, and hurried back to her house. I smiled for the first time in weeks. That evening, the Facebook group lit up with a brand new post from Karen, a self-righteous warning about property violations endangering neighborhood value, citing my fake rule word for word. She even accused the HOA of corruption and favoritism. And that was her mistake. Because by accusing the HOA publicly, she'd crossed the one line that her precious reputation couldn't survive. The board tolerated her gossip, but undermining their authority, that was treason. Within hours, the comment section erupted. Board members chimed in, confused and defensive. Neighbors demanded proof. Karen doubled down, claiming she had documents from my bin. She didn't realize she'd just confessed to trespassing, in writing, for everyone to see. By the next morning, my phone was flooded with messages. Henderson from the HOA called first, his voice tight and clipped. He wanted to discuss developments regarding Ms. Karen's online behavior. He didn't say much else, but I could tell from his tone, something was unraveling. That evening, the HOA held an emergency board meeting. I wasn't invited, but word travels fast in Maplewood Estates. Pam, the secretary, nervous but sympathetic, sent me a quiet text. They found out she's been filing false reports. It's bad. I opened my camera app again and rewatched the footage of Karen stealing the fake notice. The timestamp glowed like a trophy. Proof of everything, her lies, her manipulations, her invasion of privacy. I didn't need to post it. I didn't need to say a word. The neighborhood had already turned on her. The next day, Karen's pristine world began to crumble. Her front yard, once a showcase of perfection, looked abandoned. The HOA citation signs she loved to issue now appeared on her own lawn, courtesy of the board. Her name disappeared from the neighborhood watch roster, and by the weekend, the gossip mill confirmed what everyone suspected. Karen had been suspended from all HOA activities pending review. For a few days, the peace felt almost surreal. The silence of victory is a strange thing, satisfying, but fragile. I thought it was over. But then one night, around midnight, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze, a dull thud against my front door, then another. I peeked through the window. Nothing. I opened the door cautiously, the porch light flickering on, and there it was. A package, no label. No markings, just a plain brown box sitting perfectly centered on the doormat. My heart pounded as I crouched down. Every nerve in my body screamed not to touch it. The box looked ordinary, but the symbolism was clear. It was Karen's move. After everything, she'd found a way to answer my trap with one of her own. I stood there, frozen, staring at that package. The air thick with memory, of missing boxes, of glitter, of everything that had spiraled out of control. I could almost hear her voice echoing in the silence. "Let's see how clever you really are." I stepped back, locked the door, and turned off the lights. The porch camera blinked silently, recording. If this was war, then it had just entered its final phase. And this time, I wasn't the only one setting traps. It sat there like a ghost from the past, that brown cardboard box, plain and unassuming, resting neatly on my doormat. But I knew better. Nothing about it was ordinary. It wasn't just cardboard and tape. It was a message, a challenge, a taunt wrapped in corrugated paper. I stared at it through the peephole for what felt like hours. My mind raced through possibilities, each darker than the last. Maybe it was empty, meant to scare me. Maybe it contained something, a note, a warning, proof that Karen wasn't finished. Or worse, maybe it was another trap, her own brand of poetic revenge. After all, she had a flair for dramatics that matched my own. The irony wasn't lost on me. Months ago, I had built a glitter bomb to expose her lies. Now she'd left me a box, daring me to touch it. I wasn't about to make that mistake. The next morning, I called the local post office and the delivery companies. None of them had any record of a package scheduled for me. I even asked the mail carrier directly when he came by. He glanced at the box, frowned, and said, "That wasn't from us." That confirmed it. Whatever this was, it came from her. For 2 days, I didn't move it. It stayed on the porch like an accusation, drawing the stares of every passerby. Some neighbors slowed down when walking past, pretending to check their phones while sneaking glances. I could practically feel the gossip forming, whispers about my paranoia, my feud, the mysterious box I refused to touch. By day 3, I realized that leaving it there was giving her exactly what she wanted. She wanted me nervous, on edge, unraveling again, the same way she'd been after the glitter bomb. I could almost picture her behind her blinds watching me pace, sipping her coffee with that smug little smirk, so I decided to take control, on my terms. I put on gloves, turned on my camera, and approached the box, slowly, carefully. My porch camera recorded everything as I picked it up, feeling its weight. Light, too light. I shook it gently and no sound. I held my breath, peeled back the tape, and lifted the lid. Inside, there was no note, no glitter, no threat, just a single pristine white envelope. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a photograph. It was me, standing in my kitchen, taken through my window. My stomach dropped. The photo was recent, maybe 2 nights ago. I was wearing the same hoodie I'd fallen asleep in after working late. The image was grainy, slightly tilted, but unmistakably real. Someone had been outside my house close enough to take the picture through the blinds. My first thought was to call the police. But what would I tell them? That my neighbor, the same one I humiliated online, was stalking me with photographs and anonymous packages. It sounded unhinged, exactly the kind of story she'd twist to make me look unstable. Still, I had to act. I spent the next few hours combing through my security footage. Frame by frame, nothing. Whoever took that picture had found a blind spot. The one angle my cameras didn't cover, the side of the kitchen, window near the fence line, and that's when I remembered. Karen's property backed up right behind that fence. The rage that rose in me was pure and cold. This wasn't petty anymore. She had crossed into something darker, an obsession. That night I fortified the house. I added new cameras, one pointing directly at the fence, Another watching the side yard. I even set up motion sensors that pinged my phone whenever there was movement. I wanted her to know I was watching now, that whatever she was planning, I was ready. But nothing happened. For days, the sensors stayed silent. No more packages, no more letters, just stillness, a suffocating calm. It almost felt like defeat, like she had grown bored and moved on. Yet something in my gut refused to believe it. Then, on the fifth night, the motion alert went off. It was 2:46 a.m. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and opened the camera feed. At first I saw nothing, just shadows swaying with the breeze. Then, movement. A figure moving along the fence line. Even from the low light, I knew who it was. The same outline, the same posture. Karen. She was holding something, a flashlight and what looked like a phone. She moved slowly, methodically, scanning the ground, the air, my windows. I watched, frozen, as she stopped right behind the kitchen. She raised her phone and started taking pictures, again. This time I had her. Every movement captured, every frame time-stamped. And then something unexpected happened. A second figure appeared, another person stepping out from behind her house. A man, tall, broad-shouldered. He spoke to her. I couldn't hear, but I could see the gestures, the sharp back-and-forth movements. She looked furious, waving her hands in protest. He pointed toward my house, said something, and stormed off. Karen stood there alone, shaking, before retreating back inside. I didn't know who the man was. A friend? A family member? Maybe someone from the HOA finally confronting her. But the encounter left me uneasy. If someone close to her was warning her off, it meant she'd gone too far, even for them. The next morning, I found something wedged in my fence, a torn piece of paper flapping in the wind. I pulled it free. It was another photograph. The same one of me in my kitchen. Only this time, someone had written across it in red marker. You don't know who you're dealing with. That was the moment I stopped being afraid. Fear had served its purpose. It had kept me alert, cautious. But now it was time to end this. I realized that Karen wasn't some all-powerful villain. She was desperate, cornered, and desperate people make mistakes. So, I decided to give her one last chance. One final setup. I printed a flyer announcing that the HOA would be installing new security street cameras across Maplewood Estates, including one directly facing her property. I made sure she'd see it, posting it on the community board, in the group chat, even sliding a copy under her mailbox. That night, I waited. If she was watching me, she'd panic. If she was planning something, she'd move before the cameras went live. At exactly 11:58 p.m., the motion sensor pinged again. Through the live feed, I saw her silhouette creeping out from her back door, moving quickly, nervously. She walked to the fence, crouched down, and began digging near the posts. I zoomed in. She wasn't burying something. She was removing something. A small, black object. My blood ran cold. It was a camera. One that wasn't mine. Karen hadn't just been sneaking around my property. She'd planted a hidden camera on my fence, watching me for weeks. And now she was trying to get rid of the evidence. I hit record, capturing every second, her face illuminated by her flashlight, her hands shaking as she yanked the device free. She stuffed it in her pocket and hurried back inside, unaware that this time, she wasn't the one doing the watching. By morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about glitter or embarrassment or winning. It was about ending it, for good. I packaged the footage neatly on a flash drive, labeled it simply, evidence. Then, I made a call to someone who could make sure it mattered. Not the HOA, not the neighbors, but the police. Because when someone crosses from petty theft to surveillance, it stops being a feud. It becomes a crime. The morning after I sent the evidence felt eerily calm. Too calm, like the air before a storm breaks. The flash drive sat in an evidence bag at the local precinct, my written statement attached, and for the first time in months, the chaos wasn't mine to control. It was in the hands of people who had authority, who could make it official. But calm can be deceptive. At first, nothing happened. No police at her door, no sirens, no neighborhood buzz. Karen's curtains stayed drawn, her car unmoved in the driveway, her yard immaculate as ever. It was as though nothing had changed, but deep down, I knew everything had. The weight of truth had shifted, and it was only a matter of time before it came crashing down. I kept my distance that day, watching from behind my blinds, listening for signs. The sun rose, neighbors went about their routines, and the world pretended to be normal. I almost convinced myself I had overreacted, that maybe, somehow the police hadn't believed me. Then, at 3:42 p.m., 2 patrol cars rolled into Maplewood Estates. They stopped right in front of Karen's house. From my window, I watched officers step out, knock on her door, and wait. When she finally appeared, her face was a perfect mask. Polite confusion, hands folded neatly, the performance of innocence she'd rehearsed her whole life. But then they showed her something, a photograph, maybe a warrant, and the act shattered. Her expression twisted. Shock, anger, denial. She gestured wildly, talking fast, the way people do when they're cornered. But the officers didn't flinch. They stepped inside her house, leaving the door ajar. For 20 agonizing minutes, the neighborhood froze. Curtains fluttered in every direction as people peeked out. Phones clicked. The suburban grapevine buzzed like an electric wire. When the officers emerged, Karen followed, not in handcuffs, but close enough that the message was clear. This wasn't a friendly chat. They escorted her to her car, handed her a document, and spoke quietly. Then, without a word, they left. I didn't know what they'd said to her, but I knew it was over. Or at least, I thought it was. That night, the neighborhood was alive with gossip. Someone had seen the police take a small device from her house, a camera, they said. Others claimed she'd been caught violating privacy laws. The HOA board group chat exploded, messages pouring in faster than I could read. Henderson even posted a public statement. The HOA does not tolerate harassment or unlawful surveillance between members. An internal investigation has concluded, and disciplinary action is being taken. For once, Karen's name wasn't protected by euphemisms or polite avoidance. Everyone knew exactly who it was about. The comment section was merciless. Neighbors she'd bullied for years came out of hiding. Old grudges resurfaced. Stories of her manipulation and hypocrisy pouring out like a confession. She had made enemies out of almost everyone, and now they finally had permission to speak. By morning, Karen's empire of control had crumbled. Her Facebook account vanished. The little neighborhood watch sign that stood proudly in her yard was gone. And by the end of the week, a moving truck appeared in her driveway. It should have felt like victory. The poetic ending to a long, exhausting battle. I should have been celebrating, maybe even posting my own victory update in the group, letting everyone know how justice had finally been served. But standing there, watching her possessions being loaded into cardboard boxes, I felt something else. Not satisfaction, emptiness. For all her cruelty, Karen was still human, a product of the same quiet desperation that infected our pristine little neighborhood. The endless competition for perfection, the illusion of control. Maybe she just lost sight of where to draw the line. Maybe we both did. As her car pulled away for the last time, I noticed something glinting in her trash bin, a small, clear plastic bag. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked over, peered inside, and froze. It was the broken remains of my glitter bomb. The original one. She'd kept it. All this time. It was dented and cracked, bits of pink and gold still clinging to the edges, the remnants of that one moment that started everything. I stared at it, remembering the thrill of setting it up, the satisfaction of catching her red-handed, the laughter that came after the chaos. And for the first time, I wondered, was it justice, or was it the spark that ignited something I couldn't control? I tossed the bag back into the bin and turned away. That night I sat on my porch, the air still, the streetlights humming softly. For the first time in months, there were no suspicious footsteps, no rustling behind fences, no motion alerts on my phone. Just quiet. And yet something inside me couldn't let go. The habits of war don't die easily. Every sound made me glance up. Every shadow felt like a memory. I'd spent so long reacting, fighting, defending. I didn't know how to live without the conflict. The next morning, I decided to reset everything. I deleted the footage from my cameras, cleared the storage, and shut them off. For the first time, My porch felt like home again, not a surveillance zone. I ordered new plants for the garden, fresh paint for the door, even a new welcome mat. Something bright, friendly, ironic in its simplicity. But peace, in neighborhoods like ours, never lasts long. A week later, a new family moved into Karen's house. They seemed nice enough, young couple, friendly smiles, waved when they saw me. I helped them carry in a few boxes, pretending not to notice the faint outline where Karen's perfect yards only sign used to hang. As we chatted, the wife mentioned something strange. "It's funny," she said with a laugh. "The realtor told us the last owner left in a hurry. They said she got into some kind of feud. Anyway, we found a bunch of weird stuff in the attic. Cameras, wires, even a box of glitter. Can you imagine?" I froze, the smile on my face tightening. She didn't notice. She just laughed again, waving it off like a joke, before turning to help her husband unpack. But I stood there on the sidewalk, staring at that house, Karen's house, feeling a cold ripple run through me. Cameras, wires, glitter. She'd been planning something else. Something I never discovered. And now those pieces were out there, in someone else's hands. That night, as I sat inside, the neighborhood lights flickering outside, I couldn't help but wonder if I had truly seen the last of her. Because if there's one thing I'd learned from living next to Karen, it's this: people like her never really disappear. They just move to a new house, a new neighborhood, a new game. And somewhere out there, another poor soul would be missing packages soon. The neighborhood had settled back into its rhythm. The quiet hum of sprinklers in the morning, the drone of lawnmowers in the afternoon, and the soft glow of porch lights at night. For the first time in a long while, Maplewood Estates felt ordinary. Karen was gone. The HOA drama had cooled, and my name had stopped being whispered in hushed tones at mailbox gatherings. The new neighbors were friendly, the kind who smiled without judgment and waved without suspicion. My porch cameras were gone, my fence repaired, my nerves finally starting to heal. But peace in this neighborhood, I had learned, was like glass. Clear, beautiful, but fragile. It started small. A single package went missing. Not mine this time, but my next-door neighbor, Melissa's. She mentioned it casually while trimming her hedges one morning. "Probably porch pirates," she said, rolling her eyes. "Happens everywhere these days," I nodded. But something in her tone made me pause. That mix of annoyance and resignation I'd used myself not so long ago. Then, 2 days later, another neighbor lost one, and another. By the end of the week, there were 4 reports in the community chat. Old fears stirred in my chest. Coincidence, I told myself. Bad luck, delivery errors. But the pattern was too familiar, too precise. Always small packages, always in daylight, always gone without a trace. And then came the photo. Someone in the chat posted a grainy still from their doorbell camera. It showed a figure walking up a driveway, baseball cap, hoodie, mask. The face was hidden, but the stance, the angle of the shoulders, the quick, sharp way they turned toward the camera before ducking away. It sent a chill through me. It looked like her. It couldn't be. She'd moved away. There was no reason she'd come back. But the thought lingered, sinking deeper into my mind. I told myself it was paranoia, leftover trauma from months of warfare. Still, I found myself scanning the street at night, listening for footsteps, glancing at shadows on fences. That's when the first letter arrived. No envelope, no signature, just a single sheet of paper slid under my door. Written in neat, deliberate handwriting were 5 words. "You never caught the real one." The words echoed in my head for hours. I turned the paper over and over, searching for a clue, a watermark, a fingerprint, anything. But there was nothing. Just that cryptic message, mocking me. Whoever left it knew where I lived, knew the history. It had to be someone from the neighborhood, someone who'd been watching all along. I told myself not to fall into old patterns, but curiosity and fear won. That night, I reinstalled one of my old cameras, positioning it toward the street. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post about it. I just watched, quietly. Days passed. The missing packages continued. A new thread appeared online. Neighbors speculating about porch thieves, calling for more patrols. The HOA even announced a neighborhood watch relaunch. The irony wasn't lost on me. Then, One evening around dusk I saw it. Through the camera feed, a figure emerged, hooded, careful, moving low. They approached my porch, paused, then turned toward the house across the street. They knelt down, lifted a package, and slipped it into a bag. It was fast, efficient, almost practiced, but this time, I was ready. I slipped outside quietly, staying in the shadows, moving along the side of my house until I reached the fence line. The figure was still there, halfway down the driveway, unaware they were being watched. I stepped forward, just enough to trigger the motion light. It flicked on, flooding the street with harsh white light. The thief froze. They turned slowly, the bag still in hand. The hood slipped just enough for me to see the edge of a face, pale, sharp. And then, a flash of something glittering. For a split second, I saw it, specks of pink and gold dust clinging to their sleeve. My heart stopped. No one else in this entire neighborhood would have that. It was her. Karen. Before I could move, she bolted. Down the street, across the corner, disappearing into the dark like a phantom returning to haunt her old stage. I didn't chase her. I didn't call out. I just stood there under the porch light, staring at the glitter flakes twinkling faintly on the pavement, the remnants of a past I thought I'd buried. The next morning I called the police again. They took my footage, my statement, everything, but this time they didn't seem surprised. The officer, a young guy with tired eyes, sighed as he reviewed the video. "We've had similar reports in the next town over," he said. "Same MO, same look. She's been at it for a while." So she hadn't disappeared. She'd simply moved her operation, refining it, perfecting it, and now circling back like a storm that couldn't let go of the place it started. They promised to investigate. But deep down, I knew the truth. Even if they caught her, it wouldn't end there. People like Karen didn't stop. They adapted. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the empty spot on my porch where the last package had vanished. And that's when the idea came to me, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. If Karen wanted to keep stealing, then I'd give her something to steal. One last package. I spent the next day assembling it. The design was simple: a box, a trigger, a fine powder that would burst on opening. But this time, it wasn't glitter. It was fluorescent dye, harmless, but impossible to wash off. I left the package on my porch just before sunset, right where she'd be sure to see it. Then I waited, camera ready. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. I almost gave up. Then, movement. The shadow appeared again, creeping up the walkway, the same cautious movements as before. The thief reached for the box, lifted it, and paused, as if savoring the thrill. Then came the click. A soft puff erupted, and the air shimmered with pink light. The figure stumbled back, covered in the dye, glowing faintly under the streetlight. She let out a muffled cry and ran, vanishing into the night. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The next morning, the police found her 2 blocks away, the dye still staining her hands and face. When they arrested her, she was shouting about conspiracies, betrayal, and revenge. The same words she used to throw at me now twisted against herself. And just like that, it was over. For real this time. Weeks passed. The neighborhood settled again. Packages stayed where they belonged. The HOA chat was quiet, almost boring. I found myself missing the chaos sometimes, the strange energy of being part of something dramatic, even if it was toxic. But then I'd look at the new welcome, sign by my front door, the one that still sparkled faintly from the dye that drifted onto it, and I'd remember how close I came to losing everything, over a box and a handful of glitter. Sometimes I still find traces of it, a shimmer under the porch light, a sparkle on the doormat. Tiny, harmless reminders of a battle fought and won. And whenever I see those little flecks catching the sunlight, I can't help but smile. Because after everything Karen put me through, after all the chaos, the lies, the fear, I realized something. I didn't just beat her, I outlasted her. And in the end, it wasn't revenge or glitter or traps that won. It was patience. The one thing Karen never had.